All right, we're going to be taking a look at a hand between LLinusLLove and the legend Iceman at high stakes today. It was posted in the 2+2 high stakes forum. Let's see. Isn't it? Here we go. And it's a spot, small blind versus big blind at 5100 NL. Basically, Iceman opens for 3x in the small blind, LLinusLLove flats with a7 off, and Iceman has jack-jack. Flop comes 7-4-4 suited, and Iceman checks. LLinusLLove bets half pot. Iceman just flats with the jacks instead of check raising. Flats again on the turn versus 66% turn sizing. And then on the river, LLinusLLove overbets with his full house after a turn blank and a river 4. And Iceman shoves over with the jacks. So I thought this hand was a bit interesting. I think Iceman's play is a bit something out of the ordinary for me. Usually I'd be check raising the jacks, probably either if I'm not doing it on the flop, then probably doing it on the turn. So I'm interested in whether we are protecting our checking range so much by calling our overpairs here, and interested in his overbet from LLinusLLove on the 4, whether that is GTO or not GTO. Okay. So I ran a GTO plus simulation in this scenario. Here is the small blind's range. So Iceman's range from the small blind opening about 46%, including most of the offsuit aces, offsuit cards 8 and above, pretty standard range, although these players may be opening a bit wider. Both Iceman from the small blind being a pretty loose player as far as I know, and Linus may be flatting a bit wider in position than this 43.5%. I have him 3-betting polarized range. This I got from some Monker Solver simulations, basically 3-betting a lot of these suited connectors, pocket pairs, and then some of these crappy offsuit hands and crappy suited hands. I assume Linus will probably be flatting a bit wider in this, but it should give us a decent idea of what's going on. Then in terms of the tree, what's happening here? We allow donks on the flop. I'm just giving 50% bet sizings to each player. If you run some of these low paired flops, suited flops, you'll find that 50% sizing is kind of like a reasonable simplified strategy, just kind of not betting 100% but using a mixed strategy. 50% check raises and raises on every street, relatively common raise size for kind of merged raising ranges. And then on the turn and river, we basically have 3-bet sizings. We have the block sizing 66%, and then overbet sizings for every position. And then in position player, we just have 2 large sizings really on the river, 75% and 200%. So we'll have a look at the play here. Basically on the flop, Iceman should be checking this flop a whole bunch, given that this generally hits the in-position player's range a bit better with the suitedness, as well as in-position should have a bit more 4s, a bit more 7s, that kind of thing, a bit more straight draws. So really should only be favoring bets with kind of these, like 8s and 9s wants the bet. 4s want to bet for value. Some of the better 7s want to bet. Then there's kind of this bluffing range with flush draws and overcards and backdoor straight and flush draws with overcards for the most part, as well as some connectedness around the 7 and 4. But he checks. And Linus should be stabbing 50% with most of the 4s. all this is like over pairs without a spade, which are extremely vulnerable on this board, obviously, to overcards and spades coming. And a7 is kind of like a pure bet. It's a very, very strong hand in this case and pretty vulnerable, so makes sense to bet here. Half pot, that's not really too surprising, this type of range. And he's kind of stabbing with flush draws, kind of a mixed variety, checking some of these ones like queen jack suited with two good overcards, and the flush draw seemed to favor a check like king 10 suited, queen jack suited, but betting like half the nut flush draws and then a bunch of these like jack highs and 10 highs, checking some of the lowest flush draws. Okay, but so Linus bets. And surprisingly, Iceman should actually be flighting jacks here. That's a relatively low check raise percentage. Out of the jacks that it likes to check raise with, it likes check raising with jacks that don't have a diamond or spade in their hand. Presumably because it doesn't block some of the crappy hands that in position will be forced to float here. So like queen jack with diamonds and stuff like that, I probably have to be defended against a check raise, as well as like jack 10 of diamonds, which jacks is just like absolutely crushing. And yeah, check raising a bunch of 4s, some 7s, that kind of thing, and overcards with backdoors. Okay, but flats, and turn is the, what was it, 2 of clubs. Let's see. What does it? I'm pretty sure it was an offsuit too. Anyways, yeah, 2 clubs. Okay, and turn is a check, and Linus is barreling pretty much with all of its a7. Most of the 7s here, checking back only some of them, almost all the 4s, some of the 4s getting overbet. And again, some of these overcards with flush draws and that type of shit. Whole bunch of 2s. But he bets the 66% sizing, we get a call, and river is a 4 of clubs. Or hearts, doesn't really matter. And interestingly, when the board trips up like this, the small blind Iceman gets to lead 5% of hands, and it actually wants to start leading like jacks, 10s, 9s, 8s here, with a bunch of whiffed flush draws that have no showdown value that were check calling. It's like 10-6 suited and 10-8 suited, all these 6-5s, 6-4s, so kind of like the worst showdown value hands, and then these pocket pairs seem to work out. But he checks, and yeah, Linus is checking back 67% of the time here, so it makes sense that Iceman gets to develop a leading range here with kind of his best pocket pairs and some bluffs. And interesting, solver doesn't really bet a7 that much here, but bets king 7, queen 7, jack 7, 10 7. I'm guessing that's due to the fact that having the ace in your hand kind of blocks the calling range that you're looking to get called by, which is mostly ace high in this scenario. And really, Linus at equilibrium should only be overbetting 4s. So quads, 5-4, 4-2, ace 4, king 4, that kind of thing. and only favors kind of the 75% river bet with the 7x and 8-8-9-9 kind of thing. Bluffing these overcards that block the 7 pretty good, and 10-10, Jack-Jack, 8-8-9-9. They kind of are good bluffs. They have good blockers to the calling range in that respect. But let's say Linus overbets. What does ICEMAN have to defend? And you will have to defend some ace high here, even to like the overbet, which is pretty nuts. So Linus may be making a good bet here, thinking that ICEMAN is showing up to the river with so much ace high here that that he's likely to call an overbet with, maybe like half the time or something like that, where solver is really folding ace high quite a bit, much more than half the time at least, maybe folding it like 75% of the time. So he's really kind of getting top. Interestingly, solver is also folding 7s a lot, so I don't know what that says. That's a bit surprising to me. And jacks here is just calling, not shoving over the raise. So they're getting a bit more aggressive on the river than equilibrium here, which presumably LLinusLLove figures ICEMAN to be check raising 8-8-9-9, 10-10, Jack-Jack, Queen-Queen, King-King at some point. Maybe he still has aces in his range. Linus figures. So when he gets to the river, his 7 is really the nuts to him. So I think he's making like a decent exploit. The thing I want to look at is this donking range here. So when we get 2-barreled into this board, we're calling with a bunch of ace highs, basically. Some king highs, mostly with flush draws. But yeah, basically a whole bunch of flush draws. Some like straight draws, let's see, like 6-5, obviously. Even like a bit of ace-5, like gutters. 5-3. Well, 5-3 gets check raised. And then protecting this ace high, this giant ace high range, and 7s are the 7s and a bunch of pocket pairs. So what happens on like an ace river, I wonder? So ace river presumably hits our check calling range really well, and we get the donk like the small size in the third here with like half of our ace pairs of aces here, which kind of makes sense. And a bunch of bluffs, which just include all whiffed flush draws with low showdown value. So all the 10-8s, queen high flush draws, and then in order to accommodate that bluff range, we just bet enough pairs of aces, it seems. So that's pretty neat. What about like on a spade? Since we're check calling so many flush draws, but presumably Linus will be barreling a bunch of flush draws into us as well. Say like the 9 of spades. We get a small leading range, like ace-9. Our overpairs, not too many flushes. Flushes are only leading like 20% of the time we make them, with mostly nut flush draws, king flush draws, that kind of thing. Linus is only supposed to be checking back like 57% of the time, so there's a whole lot of lost value by checking the river with a flush. And going for the check raise, I assume we're check raising all our flushes mostly, except for the maybe some jack highs and 10 eyes ones don't Okay, that's interesting. I think looking at what is mandatory to defend here in the small blind, given the fact that I expect most people to be check raising or betting the flop themselves out of position with overpairs, like 8s plus, and even some like A7, King 7 type of deal. I think I like barreling rivers as a bluff quite frequently here. I expect, on the turn here when we check and double barrel, solver actually is folding about half the ace high here. I think in practice people on a blank turn are probably calling with the ace highs a bit too much. that leaves their river range very weak. So if we triple barrel here, we end up facing a lot of ace highs, which with like difficult decisions. There's a lot of ace jack off, a lot of ace queen off, a lot of these ace 10 off hands that presumably are going to be folding to a triple, especially when we credibly rep any 7 here, barreling for 3 streets for value. Anyways, that's my look at this LLinusLLove hand. I'll hopefully be doing a few more in the future.